Ryan Browne. Everybody give him a warm welcome. Thank you very much. And so I've asked the same question of the other creators today. Let me just go for each one of you. How did you get started in comics? How did you get into the industry?
Hi, I'm Ryan. I got into comics by doing it myself. So I did a lot of self-publishing. I tried to do the typical thing of doing pencil samples and submitting them to editors, and I never found any luck with that. But I did find my audience via doing a weirdo comic called God Hates Astronauts, which I wrote and drew and self-published and put on the web and went around the shows and hand sold it to people. And so eventually enough people paid attention, particularly the people at Image Comics, and they published a new series of God Hates Astronauts, and then I went on from there. Primarily working with Image Comics on creator-owned books, and then dabbling with pretty much every publisher in some minor capacity at some point.
My name is Charles Soule. I am a writer of comics, and I broke in the way that most comic writers break in, which is I went to law school. And I realized after graduating from law school that I didn't want to be a lawyer and had to write my way out of it. And that is basically what I did. I started figuring out the way writing novels worked, figuring out the way writing comics worked, and kind of worked my way up through, much like Ryan has done, through sort of the minor leagues of comics, the super indie books that sell, a few hundred copies if you're lucky. And that involved a lot of traveling all around the country to conventions like this one, and just meeting whoever I could and talking to whoever I could and trying to get them to be interested in my work. And eventually, I think more than networking than the quality of any of my stories led to one of my books being picked up at Image. It's a book called 27, and then from there I was able to kind of, every rung on the ladder I was able to parlay into getting access to the next rung up on the ladder. So eventually that got me into DC, offering me a job on Swamp Thing, who is a man made of plants, which is very fun. That's actually the Swamp Thing was the first place Ryan and I officially collaborated, I think. We had done some one-off gag strips and stuff before that, but that's the first thing we ever actually did together. And then that got me, the easiest way to get a job at Marvel is to get a job at DC. So shortly after I started working on Swamp Thing, Marvel's like, hey, what do you got for us? And so I started working on a book called Thunderbolts there. Then I started working on a book called She-Hulk there, which I'm very proud of. And then I did another book with this guy called Death of Wolverine, which I was shocked by because I was such a huge fan of Steve's work before that, as he'll tell you some of the stuff he's done. He's pretty amazing. And the idea that I was like a total baby creator at Marvel, and that I was going to get to work with Steve on a story where Wolverine was killed was really amazing. But I did my best with it. Steve did his very best with it, and that led to many more opportunities, which led to me sitting here on the stage today.
And I'm Steve. Is this like really loud? Like if I get really loud here, is that too much? Like about here? So my dad's a hedge fund billionaire, so I just bought my way into comics. I kind of want to leave it like that, and I'm hoping that might make it to the internet. So if you really want to know like the other truth, just come and ask me. I'll let you know. But officially, hedge fund billionaire son, bought my way into the industry.
I gotcha.
Awesome stuff. Well, all three of you have worked on Star Wars books, and I think that's why they put you on the panel together.
I'm not Star Wars guy.
Not at all?
I do
8 Billion Genies. Yeah. And
I
I thought you were working on Star Wars as well.
No, I've read Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
So that
Some
was,
of them. Most, the Ewok one.
so that was the question that I had for you guys was, what was your first encounter with Star Wars? How did you get into it? What was that like? Kind of your meet cute.
First encounter with Star Wars. That's the question.
My first encounter with Star Wars was seeing it in the movie theater, and a re-release This is A New Hope. So the movie was re-released in 78, 79, and I think in 80 to connect with Empire. And I saw it in one of those years. My parents took me, my whole family. There's 4 kids in my family. We all fell in love with it. Started bugging our parents for the action figures and all kinds of stuff. My dad started telling us bedtime stories about Star Wars, and loved it. Became totally obsessed. One of the kids who would play in the playground with sticks pretending they were lightsabers. I was absolutely a Star Wars addict. Watched the Ewok movies. I was so hard up for stuff that was Star Wars related. And then when Marvel started to have its Star Wars line around 2014, after Disney bought Lucasfilm from George Lucas, they kind of put out a call for people who might have ideas for Star Wars miniseries, and I pitched them on a Palpatine miniseries. I gotta stop these P's. A Palpatine miniseries and a Lando miniseries, and I ended up writing the Lando series. And again, here we are today. Ryan, how'd you get into Star Wars?
Pretty much the same story. I had an older brother that is almost Charles's age, and he got all the toys, so I was playing with the toys. Well, I was too young. I was born in 81. Yeah. I know. I think that I was taken to see Jedi in the theater, but I have no memory of it. And but I was playing with the toys from very, very young, because we had that was the big fascination of my older brother, was Star Wars and Kenner toys, and so I grew up playing with all of those, and now I let my children play with all of them because we still have them all. And my son tore the arm off Jabba, which I blame on just really old rubbery plastic. But I'm glad they're being enjoyed by yet another generation, and my children have no idea who these toys are. But boy, they really like making characters ride in the Tauntaun. That's my Star Wars experience.
Very good.
So my dad bought Star Wars. No, I'll let that go. I'll let it go. I actually saw it in the theater when I was 10. First Star Wars movie. Just went back round and around watching it. That's my first experience with Star Wars. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I'm gonna ask you guys about a 8 Billion Genies question. So that book is really taken off. 8 Billion Genies. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Book. And I was gonna ask, what was the collaboration process between the both of you on creating it?
So.
Won't even do a variant cover for us. Come on, Steve. Do you want to start?
So Charles and I did a book called 8 Billion Genies for Image Comics, which just wrapped up the 8th and final issue in, I don't know, when did that come out? April, May. And so we have been working together for a while. We did a series before called Curse Words that had 29 issues for Image Comics. And then we took a break and kind of figured out what we were going to do next. And I had come up with this just dumb hypothetical, which I love to do, is come up with dumb hypotheticals. And one of the dumb hypotheticals I came up with is, what would happen if everybody in the world had a genie that granted them one wish? And so that was just like a fun spitballing, what would happen to the world if everyone had one wish? It would be utter chaos. And it was just really fun to sit around having a couple of drinks or a dinner or whatever, and just have fun building a world out of what would happen if everyone had their own wish. But it never seemed like an actual tellable story, because on page 1 someone would wish for the world to blow up, and then that's the end of the story. So we never really considered it as a real idea, but Charles wouldn't let it go. It was one of my dumb hypotheticals he would not let go. The only one, actually. And so that was before Curse Words, and after Curse Words we were cycling around trying to figure out what to do next. And Charles came back up with 8 Billion Genies, and I said, yeah, I don't know, it seems impossible. And he sat with it, and then he figured out the structure of the book that made it an actual, extremely difficult comic, but one that was actually could work and could be a launching point for lots and lots of ideas of what people would wish for.
Let me clarify one thing. 8 Billion Genies is not a difficult comic for you guys, the readers. For you guys, it's like drinking a warm mug of melted butter. It's amazing. Creating it, however, was incredibly difficult because of the structure of it, because of we had to pour so much imagination into it constantly, because you have to be thinking of all of the ways that everyone on Earth might be wishing, and the things that they would be wishing for, and the way that those wishes might affect other people, and you think about every person sitting here in this room today. Every person has their heart's desire, and while that's really fun to write from a character revealing standpoint, your heart's desire might conflict with your heart's desire and your heart's desire, and so finding ways to work within a rule set that allowed for those heart's desires to be expressed and be seen, while also having a story that could progress and have characters that maintain and that you like. One of Ryan's biggest fears with this concept, and as he said, someone would wish that the world would blow up. He also often was worried that somebody would wish that everyone would be turned into a pile of batteries, which I thought was a very evocative image. Just piles of batteries everywhere you look. That would not make a great comic. So my job as the writer was to avoid the battery problem, which is significant, and just try to find a way to bring out that core idea that everybody has the one thing they would wish for if they could, with the added complexity of everybody else gets to do it too. And so we found a structure that we really liked. Ryan and I have worked together for a long time, as have Steve and I think, well, I don't know what they think of me, but hopefully they would say that there's a lot of trust that's built up in the creative relationship. And so I know that if I ask Steve to do an intricate, incredible action sequence or a really deep character moment or essentially anything, the same is true of Ryan, it's going to be executed. And I think they trust me to make sure that the story's going to have internal logic, it's going to have the beats that they want, the big action, the moments that really make people remember a story. And 8 Billion Genies was one of the hardest ones that I've ever done along those lines, just making sure it could all work, because the premise is it sounds impossible, as Ryan pointed out. So the job was to make it not impossible and to make it land, and we really did. We're working on something else now that's similar. There's no genies in it, but it's also incredibly difficult for different reasons, but we could draw some genies in it, and we'll see what we do. Anyway, so that's how 8 Billion Genies came about.
You had an added complexity to it by adding a time element to it. And so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, the series is 8 issues, and it was designed as 8 issues from the start. And each issue covers a chunk of time from the moment the genies arrive. So the first issue covers the first 8 minutes from the moment the genies simultaneously pop up. The second issue covers the first 8 hours. Then the third one is the first 8 days, and so on, all the way to the first 8 centuries. So you have 8 issues of material that cover 800 years of story time. I know you're like, how could that work? It almost doesn't, but when all's said and done, I think it does, and it really comes down to just a lot of. I often say that this book was Ryan and I working at the absolute top of our game, like really doing everything we could to make all of these tricks work. And I'm amazed that we pulled it off.
Awesome stuff. So how much different is it working on your own stuff, creator-owned stuff, as opposed to having the constraints of working for Marvel or DC, where you have legacy characters?
So creator-owned versus work for hire. It's at the end of the day, it's comics, and if you like doing it, if you love the process, I don't think that aspect of the commercial art aspect of comics doesn't really enter my mind when I'm sitting down at the table trying to draw something fun. So a lot of times when people talk about the difference between creator-owned, I've never experienced a constraint at Marvel. Like, I've never had any point where I'm like, oh, I wish I was doing my own thing. This is so hard to do. Never. It just doesn't enter my mind. I'm just thinking, how can I tell this story really well? Like, what can I do to put energy and excitement into these pages? Make sure that the writer is satisfied with the story that I'm telling visually. Honestly. The financial differences, you can make a lot more money. If that's your big gig, though, like if what you want to do is make a whole bunch of money, don't go into comics. Be a lawyer. No, wait. Hedge fund. Yeah, get born. There are plenty of ways to make money in this world. I mean, that's the system's set up for you to make money. Everything is put together there, and then it's just up to you to decide whether money makes you happy or something else. In my case, I just love drawing comics.
So just really quick, was that a joke? Because you are a lawyer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Known these guys for a long time. They like to kid. These guys like to kid.
So I mainly do creator-owned books, sometimes self-published, sometimes with Image. I have done a handful of, licensed stuff, or working for. Mainly, my biggest run of working on a book that I don't own was I did a 4-issue series for Valiant on Quantum and Woody, and that I tend to do I don't fake it well when I'm not interested in what I'm drawing, and that's been a thing my entire life. And so part of how I finally actually broke into comics was, instead of focusing on trying to make as slick of a superhero drawing as I could, I started trying to tell stories that would make me laugh. And so this has kind of limited my marketability. And I know that there was one time that for some reason Marvel invited me to be part of a book called Secret Wars 2, TOO. And it was just a bunch of gag strips, and so they let me write and draw a five-page story that I made about Daredevil, the bear without fear. And I just did this whole I threw a couple things in that were just a reference to an entire Marvel universe that everyone was a bear. And they just let me do whatever the hell I wanted to, and I think that was probably all they wanted from me was 5 pages. But anytime that I've gotten to draw Marvel, DC, whatever, something for Dark Horse, Ninja Turtle stuff, or whatever for IDW, it's a little stilted and a little stiff, and I can't figure out how to not make it that way. When it's something that I actually create myself or with Charles, it has a lot more of me in it, and something inherently in me really amps up my ability to tell stories in the cartoon and to draw. It'd be nice if I could figure out how to draw Daredevil or something, but I don't know. A lot of people have done that before, so my motivation generally is making up something new and telling new stories and riffing on the page. And if I want to draw characters off model, it doesn't matter, because I know who the character is, the reader knows who they are, and so if their hat looks different here, it doesn't matter. And so then I just kind of keep going forward.
So it's interesting, because you've got a guy here who works almost, mostly I would say in licensed work. I work for hire stuff. You got a guy here who works almost entirely in creator-owned work, and then I am you smush them together and you get me, not literally. A little bit. Because I've always done a ton of work for hire stuff. So whether it's Marvel, DC, or Star Wars, and a ton of creator-owned work, and I wrote my own, or write original novels and the occasional licensed novel, like a Star Wars novel or something like that. And so I almost always have my feet in both camps, so to speak. And I think they're both difficult and challenging in different ways, and you get different things from them. I get a buzz from being able to write a story about Darth Vader because I love Darth Vader since I was really little. I get a buzz from being able to write about Wolverine or whatever, Superman. Makes me happy. But I also, the idea of creating something that is that I make up with the wonderful co-creators that I get to work with, it just feels totally different. And it's a different kind of rush, but I get a rush from both of them. I also think I might just be sort of greedy. If a project sounds fun and cool, then I'll generally decide I want to do it. And I've been fortunate that for many years now, they keep offering me cool things to do.
I do have a couple of Star Wars questions. How did you get onto the Star Wars books, number one? And then number two, is there a difference in working on a Star Wars book as opposed to other Marvel characters and legacy characters like that?
That's actually, so I've done by a million miles the most Star Wars work of any of the three of us. I've been working nonstop in Star Wars since 2015. I don't think.
It's just a little more than me.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a month since 2015 that I have not had a Star Wars comic hit the stands.
Just comics.
Right, not just comics. I wrote a #1 New York Times bestselling novel called Light of the Jedi that kicked off the High Republic. I'm a consultant for Lucasfilm, so I help on all kinds of different Star Wars stories. I'm soaking in Star Wars. I'm just soaked in it. I'm soaked in Star Wars every day. Yep, it's pretty gross. But how I got into it, I mentioned before, basically Disney bought Lucasfilm, which meant Marvel started doing Star Wars comics, and I had made it known, as did almost all the other writers and artists at Marvel, hey, I love Star Wars, if you have a project, please bring it to me. And Jordan White, who was the editor at that time, let me pitch on a few things, and I pitched on the Palpatine and the Lando. The Lando's the one that went through. I did that, and it landed really, really well, to the point that they then offered me an Obi-Wan and Anakin series, and then a Poe Dameron ongoing, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And I just basically kept executing, and was able to claw my way to more and more work and a larger foothold in the Star Wars world, which I am thrilled about. I'm almost as thrilled as all those people are, and whoever just walked in. And I love doing it. And I actually would love to work on a Star Wars thing with Ryan. I think it'd be amazing. After many years of trying, I finally got to work on a Star Wars thing with Steve, which I'll let him talk about. But it was hard. It was hard to make it work. It took a long time, and the end result is amazing. But why don't you talk it up a little?
Yeah, so I got a chance to work on Star Wars through Charles. I knew that he was the Star Wars guy, and he was kind enough to say, hey, if you ever want to do something Star Wars, and I was like, that would be amazing. So we, sat down, had some drinks, and he cooked up a story that initially made me panic. Making people walk out of it.
Yeah, I know, that's great.
Initially made me panic because he had like big arenas full of people in combat and stuff like that, and I was like, yeah.
He's always stadiums. He wants to do
stadiums full of people? I think it's evil. I think it's an evil thing. Yeah.
You gotta have a stadium. It's not Charles Soule.
I did not know that you had to do stadiums too.
This is why I was not excited about being on the panel.
So I panicked a little bit, but it was Boba Fett, and so I was very excited about it, and it was a lot of fun. The one thing about Charles is that that he's going to put together a really good story. And it's very difficult. Like the story that we did takes place between Empire and Return. And it has to do with Boba Fett bringing Han Solo, who's encased in carbonite, back to Jabba. And on the way, the carbonite starts to decay, and he's freaking out because that's going to basically void his bounty. So he has to figure out a way to make that carbonite stable, and that kicks off the whole War of the Bounty Hunters thing. So it was a lot of fun. It really was. It was very. Kudos to Charles for being able to put those things together and make a really incredible story. That fits perfectly into the mythos. I think that's why they pay him the big bucks.
Ryan, how about you? I could make it happen.
How about Tauntauns versus Rancors? That's because that would be cool. Because one of the things that would terrify me about Star Wars is likenesses. That's a nightmare for me.
You make the heads less than an inch taller.
Okay. Would you guys buy a comic if I drew all the bodies and then Steve just drew all the faces for me?
Just get Star Wars cards. Cut them into the
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. There is probably someone out there that has made downloadable 3D models of every actor from Star Wars, and you can probably just trace it. Yeah. Well, no, but there's something out there you can use. But no, I would do Tauntaun versus Rancors, because.
Like a Jabba's palace thing, all the
Yeah. I mean the creatures, that's what I would only want to draw creatures. It would be called Star Wars All Creatures. Cantina.
Ryan Browne's
Yeah.
Cantina table?
Yeah. Except the cantina has expanded and has stadium seating, and it's just like thousands, thousands of droopy McCools just sitting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would do something about Max Rebo. Oh, Max Rebo one shot, and he has a tauntaun, and he fights the Rancor. Come on, man. Get George on the phone.
The tricky thing about a Max Rebo riding a Tauntaun one-shot, which I'm plotting in my head right now, is that Max Rebo, he doesn't have, Max Rebo, right? The keyboard player for Sice Noodles, right? Blue guy with plays keys.
Is he with Captain Picard?
Come on. It's not even, Captain Picard's probably in there. Anyway, so Max Rebo, the thing about him that is not well known is that he doesn't have legs. He is just a blue torso above those keys. He's like this blue, There's some dissension in the ranks, and so the reason that...
The toy has legs.
Okay, Max Rebo doesn't have legs, buddy. Anyway, so the thing that would be challenging about putting Max Rebo on a Tauntaun is that you put him on the saddle, he's just going to slide right off. There's no legs. That's the story. So it's very much like an 8 Billion Genies level challenge, where how do you actually tell a story when the first beat of the story has to be Max Rebo falling off on the ground and just sort of like wobbling around there. That's like a 1 page, maybe 2 pages. Maybe get 2 pages out of that. I don't know where you get the rest of it from, but I'll think on it.
Okay.
So my next question is, we've talked about collaboration a little bit, and I know, Steve, you work with many a writer, you've worked with many an artist, you also work with many a writer. Is that collaboration process with the different people that you work with, is it the same every time? Is it different? Are you guys looking for chemistry? What is the differences between how you approach the next piece of work that you do?
So the question is about like working with like the collaboration process. For me, I like riffing and like making stuff up, like detail work and like adding goofs in the panels. And so one of the fun things about working with Charles is that it leaves his scripts are very tight, but they leave a lot of room for me to like invent in the background and act. And so then after I draw them, Charles will go back and he'll like rewrite and adjust his script to like play off of what I've done. So it's like a little bit of a back and forth that's really, really nice. So that compared to other work that I've done, which is like turn in art and then eventually you see a final PDF. Like when we work together, we go back and forth and kind of riff, and it's a little free form, and so that like improving and riffing is what I really like. So that's why Charles and I keep working together.
Collaboration. I mean, to be honest, like I've worked with Charles a lot. We don't live in the same country, so the collaboration is usually online and through email and on phone and stuff like that, and then the occasional get together in New York or in other conventions as time may permit. So you really have to gel with the person almost immediately, and if you don't, then it's going to be a very painful experience. And I think Charles and I just worked really well together right from the get-go, and that's just kind of alchemy. It either happens or it doesn't. It's kind of like any sort of relationship that you have. It's either going to work or it's not. I've worked with a number of writers where it doesn't happen, and you're like, you work a little bit with them and you move on. And there's other writers that you would work with, till you're old and gray. And Charles is one of them that I would definitely work with, till I forget my name. But yeah, I mean, it's fun. Comics by nature is a collaborative effort. It's when you're working on Spider-Man and stuff like that, you are working with the writer. You're usually working with an inker, a colorist, a letterer. You're also working with the editors. Sometimes you're working with the PR people and the sales people. And there's it's a big machine, and if it's working right, it's a crazy ride. It really is a lot of fun. Because comics is a very lonely profession, by and large. You're working by yourself, working in at home most of the time, or if you have a studio. But you're working by yourself. You're internalizing a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of things where you just need to sit at the drawing table and get stuff done, and it can be like 10 hours, and it can be a very sort of isolating experience. So it really does help to have that collaborative effort, and to come to shows like this and talk with people, and awkwardly say
So to echo what both of these guys just said, I mean these are two of my favorite people in and outside of comics. We're all very close friends, and I don't know if these guys are friends with each other, but they're getting closer. But we have spent a lot of time hanging out outside of the work zone. You know, not just we're working on this project, so we have to talk about it, we have to figure things out. There's a lot of many meals have been had, many like dumb conversations about dumb things that we like. A lot of time is spent, and what that does is it builds up just an understanding of the other person. I know what Steve likes in a script, and I know what gets him excited, and when you have an artist who's excited about their work, it just is better. Likewise with Ryan, I know how he ticks in terms of artistic thinking, and the way I write a script for Steve is nothing like the way I write a script for Ryan, but that's part of the skill of writing with artists, is you think about the person and as a creator, and you try to make the experience awesome for them. If it's only about me and my ideas, artists can feel it and they don't like it, and you kind of get, like these guys are super pros, it's never going to be less than like a B+, A-, but you want an A+, and the way you get an A+ is by making sure that everybody's as happy about doing the work as you were about writing it. So that's really the secret to collaboration, is understanding people.
Awesome stuff, thank you. So just because we have a few more minutes, does anybody in the audience have any questions for our creators?
Awesome.
All right.
You got one? I don't know if this even works.
I guess we'll find out.
Just, was there a particular comic strip that you read growing up that inspired you to become a comic artist?
I would say more like cartoons. I would imagine, like really young would more mean Saturday morning cartoons, stuff like that, like Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes, that sort of stuff. Really, sort of like the protogenesis. Outside of like reading comics themselves, like I read comics from a very early age, so that that was always available to me and here.
I can remember reading like Sunday newspaper strips, which I don't even know if they do as much anymore, but every Sunday in the newspaper there would be a comic section where all the comics were in color, and it was you would read strips. And there was a Spider-Man strip that I thought was super cool that I think Stan Lee wrote, so that was one of my earliest introductions to superhero comics. But there were also things like soap opera comics. There was one called Mary Worth, which I remember, which was basically like a melodrama in an office or something, or a doctor's office, I think. And so the idea of serialized storytelling started there, and then my first introduction to comics and like how they work and how you get an issue and then the next one follows on, and sometimes there's series and so on, was Secret Wars 2, the acknowledged mega classic, super influential, perfect comic book with the Beyonder. But it doesn't matter where you come in, it sort of matters that you stay in, and all those concepts are new to somebody at some point. And for me, the Beyonder and like the cosmic scope of it and the scale of it and the wildness of it and the like crazy inventiveness of the ideas, I'd never seen anything like that before. And you get caught by the bug and you're like, well, I want to feel that way again. And fortunately, comics is all about big ideas, so I got to feel that way again many more times.
For me, I think it was newspaper strips, Calvin and Hobbes, Garfield. I didn't have very good taste at the time, sorry. But and then Mad Magazine. I do not read very well, and I never have. So for me, it was comics that were like silent, so like Spy versus Spy, or things that Sergio Aragonés was doing, like little doodles in the margins and stuff. And like that was the stuff that I like really got into storytelling wise, because I didn't have to read words. I could just like read the expressions. And so when I draw comics, I intentionally draw them so that you can tell what's happening without any words. Sorry about your words, Charles, but like it's very important to me that you can beginning, middle, and end on every single page. And I think that comes from reading Spy versus Spy and other magazine stuff. And then the comics that I really got into like collecting early on was Disney Adventures magazine, which had like a DuckTales comic and like Rescue Rangers comics, and I had like serialized comic books that like were within this thick magazine that you could subscribe to. So I had those, and I would read those, and those were like early influential things. And then like the first superhero stuff that I actively sought out was Silver Surfer, and it was around like Silver Surfer 50, that like crazy Thanos like foil embossed silver cover. And then I kind of went backwards from there to like read Silver Surfer comics, and but really like most of my inspiration is like gag strips and silly stuff, and like The Far Side, and like things that like I've always been really fascinated by humor in comics, and it's something that bizarrely doesn't exist very much in comics. So that's always kind of made me like a weird little outlier at this point, because I like comics that make people laugh, and no one seems to make them anymore.
I want to speak to that very quickly, because I talked about this last night on another thing we were doing. But one of the things that I think is so hard about humor in comics is that it's always a static image, and humor comes out of interaction. Humor comes out of like the build up and the setup and the payoff and all those things, which I think are just incredibly difficult to do in comics. And the thing that is so, and Steve does it with action, and Ryan does it with humor, and I'm sure they could build it the other way around too, but the thing that their panel work is so spectacular about doing is giving you see a panel, and it is ink on paper. It is it's a painting, it's a frozen moment, but you immediately know what happened 5, 10, 20 seconds before that, and you have a good sense of what's going to happen 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds after that too, because of the way they can bring life and motion and movement into it. And that is the key to humor. In Ryan's panels, you get the setup and you get the payoff in one image somehow. It's a magic trick. And in Steve's work, you get the wind up and the punch and the knockout in one image too. It is the magic of what these guys do, and they can be a little blasé about it sometimes, because that's just how they are. They're humble men, deeply humble men. He lives in Canada. He lives near Canada, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes. But it's amazing to see, as a writer, to see what they can pull off on the page is always wonderful.
So I appreciate the three of you. Steve, your work with Mark Miller on Old Man Logan is what got me back into comics after 20 years. I thought, if this is what comics is now, I got to get back into this, and I never looked back since. Charles, your work on the Daredevil run, Daryl's my favorite character.
Awesome.
And I absolutely love it. And 8 Billion Genies was my favorite book to come out this last year.
Hey,
awesome
right on.
stuff. So really great work out of all three of you. So to end this, just wanted to know, what are you guys working on now? What can we expect from you guys going forward here?
What am I working on right now? A thing with a guy.
Okay.
That's what all I can say. I do have like a 10-page Silver Surfer story coming out in, I think it's Marvel Age 1000. I'm not sure why it's 1000, but that's in August. But outside of that, I've actually been working on a big project about a guy with a guy for Marvel. But I can't really talk about it just yet, because I want to have it all done before it comes out, so the retailers won't kill me.
Here we go.
So I was going to surprise you. I'm also working on a project about a guy with a guy. Yeah, what a coincidence. That has been in the works for a very long time. It is very meticulous and beautiful, and it is essentially the only superhero work I'm doing right now. But it's worth the time. It's worth the effort. Can't wait for you guys to see it in 2039. But in any case, so that's something I'm doing. I'm running the Marvel Star Wars comics line, so that involves writing the flagship series. It involves writing the crossover that's starting this summer called Dark Droids, which is when the droids all come, like they go bad and they come for you. So imagine if like your phone, think of all the things you make your phone do, and it gets really mad at you and decides to mess you up. That's Dark Droids. I am writing a number of things for the High Republic in Star Wars right now. So there's a comic series, there's a young adult anthology that's coming out this fall. We're in a picture book with my daughter for the High Republic that's coming out this fall. And the creator-owned side, I just had my 4th novel, The Endless Vessel, come out. Ryan and I just finished 8 Billion Genies. I'm writing Undiscovered Country with Scott Snyder and Giuseppe Camicoli. I am doing a series called The Shrouded College with Will Sliney. The 2nd book of that is going to start in September. The 1st book, Hell to Page, is finished. What else am I doing? Am I missing anything? Oh, yeah. Ryan and I are currently planning our next thing, and it's super cool. We have a couple that are in the mix. I don't know which one we're going to land on, but they're both cool.
Yeah, I'm working on figuring out what the hell Charles and I are going to do next. And then I have returned to doing my self-published weirdo humor book, God Hates Astronauts. So I just finished a new issue of that, which I self-published. And then other than that, I'm just kind of goofing and trying to draw gags and stuff. And like 8 Billion Genies was such a labor-intensive and like intense experience that like I'm now trying to reset and be silly and weird and hopefully it's working.
Thank you guys very much. Did you guys have a good time today? Awesome.
Thank you.
Don't let the conversation stop. Stop by their booths, get an autograph, ask some more questions, and go see these guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.